The elegant glass doors of Harrison Enterprises swung open as Madison Wells rushed through the lobby, her heels clicking against the marble floor. She was already 10 minutes late for the morning meeting, and Robert Harrison III, her impossibly demanding boss, had made it clear that tardiness was unacceptable. The December wind had messed up her carefully styled blonde hair, and she could feel her heart racing as she approached the executive floor. The elevator doors opened to reveal a scene of controlled chaos. Robert's temporary assistant was clearing out her desk, tears streaming down her face, the third one this month. Madison's stomach dropped as she heard Robert's commanding voice coming from his office. "I don't care about excuses. If you can't handle the pressure, there's the door." The words boomed through the hallway, making everyone within earshot wince. Madison took a deep breath and straightened her burgundy blazer. As the company's HR director, she knew she'd have to deal with this situation. Before she could reach the crying assistant, Robert's office door flew open. "Madison! My office, now!" His voice left no room for argument. Robert Harrison III cut an impressive figure in his tailored charcoal suit. At 35, he had already doubled the company's revenue, earning him a reputation as a brilliant but ruthless CEO. His steel blue eyes fixed on Madison as she entered his office, the Manhattan skyline providing a dramatic backdrop through the floor-to-ceiling windows. "Close the door," he commanded, running a hand through his dark hair. "We have a situation that requires immediate attention." Madison's professional mask stayed firmly in place as she sat down, though her mind raced through possible scenarios. Another harassment complaint? A lawsuit threat from the latest fired assistant? "The board is pressuring me," Robert began, pacing behind his desk. "They're concerned about the company's image. Apparently, my rotating door of assistance and inability to maintain stable relationships is making investors nervous." He spat out the words like they were poison. "Sir, I can start interviewing new candidates immediately." "No," he cut her off sharply. "They've given me an ultimatum. Either I demonstrate stability in my personal life by Christmas, or they'll begin the process of replacing me." Madison blinked, trying to process this information. "I'm not sure I understand how I can help with your personal life, Mr. Harrison." Robert stopped pacing and planted both hands on his desk, leaning forward. "It's simple, Madison. You're the only person in this company who's managed to work with me for more than a year without quitting or getting fired. You understand how I operate, you're intelligent, and you're presentable." His eyes scanned her face analytically. "You're going to marry me before Christmas." The words hung in the air like smoke, and Madison felt as though all the oxygen had been sucked out of the room. Excuse me? It's a business arrangement," he continued, as if he were discussing a merger rather than marriage. "You'll be compensated generously, $5 million to be exact. Plus, you'll retain your position as HR director with a substantial raise." Madison's mind reeled. "Mr. Harrison, this is completely inappropriate. I can't..." "Can't what? Secure your future? Help save this company from potential chaos?" His voice softened slightly, taking on an almost persuasive tone. "Think about it, Madison. $5 million for a temporary arrangement. Once the board is satisfied, we can quietly divorce, and you'll never have to worry about money again." Madison stood up, her hands trembling slightly. "You can't be serious. This is insane." "I'm completely serious." He walked around the desk, standing uncomfortably close to her. "You have until the end of the day to decide. Either accept my offer or clear out your desk. You're threatening my job." Madison's voice rose with indignation. "I'm offering you an opportunity," he corrected smoothly. "But yes, if you decline, I can't have someone in HR who knows about this proposition. It's a liability I can't afford." Madison felt the walls closing in. Her mother's medical bills flashed through her mind, the mounting debt that kept her awake at night, the student loans she was still paying off, the dream of starting her own consulting firm that seemed forever out of reach. But as she looked into Robert's calculating eyes, she saw something else, a flicker of desperation he couldn't quite hide. This man, who had everything money could buy, was somehow more trapped than she was. "You have until 5 p.m., he said, turning back to his desk. "Don't make me regret offering this to you instead of someone else." Madison walked out of his office on shaky legs, her mind spinning. As she passed by the desk of the crying assistant, who was still gathering her things, she caught a glimpse of her own reflection in the window. The woman staring back at her looked scared, confused, and somehow already different, as if the weight of this impossible decision had already begun to change her. What she didn't know then was that this was only the beginning. The real shock would come later, when she discovered the truth about why Robert Harrison III really needed this marriage, and the dark secret he was hiding behind his Christmas deadline. A secret that would change everything she thought she knew about her boss, herself, and the true price of saying yes to his proposal. Madison sat at her desk, staring at her computer screen without really seeing it. The numbers in her bank account seemed to mock her, a stark reminder of why Robert's insane proposal wasn't as easy to dismiss as it should have been. Her mother's voice echoed in her head from their last phone call. "Don't worry about me, sweetie. The doctors say this new treatment might work." She pulled up Robert's company profile, studying the photo of the man who had just turned her world upside down. His perfect corporate smile revealed nothing of the desperation she'd glimpsed in his office. There had to be more to this story. A knock on her office door startled her. Sarah Chen, her closest friend in the company and head of legal, stood in the doorway with 2 cups of coffee. "You look like you've seen a ghost," Sarah said, closing the door behind her. "What happened in Harrison's office?" Madison accepted the coffee gratefully but hesitated. I can't really talk about it." Sarah's eyes narrowed. "Maddie, I've known you for 3 years. Something's wrong. And after that scene with his assistant this morning, rumors are flying everywhere." Before Madison could respond, her phone buzzed with a text from Robert. "Dinner tonight, 8 p.m. Le Bernardin. We need to discuss details. Car will pick you up at 7:30. Not a request, a command. Typical Robert Harrison. "He's asking me to dinner," Madison said, her voice barely a whisper. Sarah nearly choked on her coffee. "What? Robert Ice King? Harrison asked you to dinner? The same man who once said office relationships were inefficient and problematic? It's not what you think." Madison stood up, pacing her office. "Sarah, if I tell you something, can you promise to keep it completely confidential, not as my friend, but as legal counsel?" Sarah's expression turned serious. "Of course. Attorney-client privilege." Over the next few minutes, Madison explained Robert's proposition. With each detail, Sarah's eyes grew wider. "This is insane," Sarah finally said, "and probably illegal, definitely unethical." "I know, but—" Madison hesitated. $5 million, Sarah. My mom's treatments alone cost thousands every month, and with my student loans—" "Stop." Sarah held up her hand. "You can't seriously be considering this. Harrison is basically trying to buy a wife. This isn't Pretty Woman. This is potential corporate fraud." Before Madison could respond, her computer pinged with a new email. Her breath caught as she read it. It was from the hospital's billing department. Another treatment had been denied by insurance. "I have until 5 p.m. to decide," Madison said quietly. Sarah stood up, her expression grim. "Then we have work to do. If you're even considering this insanity, we need to know what you're walking into." Over the next few hours, Sarah and Madison dug deep into Robert's background, looking for anything that might explain his desperate move. Most of it was public knowledge. His father's death 5 years ago, his aggressive expansion of the company, his reputation for perfectionism. But then Sarah found something interesting. "Look at this," she said, pointing to her tablet. 3 months ago, Robert's grandmother, Eleanor Harrison, modified her will. She's still the company's major shareholder, and according to this legal filing—" Sarah's voice trailed off. "What? What does it say?" "It's heavily redacted, but there's a clause about maintaining family values and suitable marriage by the end of the year." Sarah looked up. Maddie, I think Robert's grandmother is forcing him to get married or he loses control of the company. Madison sank back in her chair. That's why the deadline is Christmas. But why me? Why not find someone from his social circle? Maybe because you're the only one who's ever stood up to him, Sarah suggested. Remember the Johnson harassment case last year? You were the only one who told him he was wrong. Madison remembered. She'd risked her job to protect an employee from unfair termination, and to her surprise, Robert had actually listened. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of research and speculation. At 4:45, Madison's phone buzzed again. Your decision? Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. Everything in her logical mind screamed that this was wrong, dangerous, possibly illegal. But then she thought of her mother, of the treatment she couldn't afford, of the dreams she'd had to put on hold. I accept, but I have conditions. His response was immediate. Discuss at dinner. Car will be waiting. At 7:30, Madison stepped into the sleek black car Robert had sent, wearing her best navy cocktail dress. Her hand clutched a folder containing a hastily drafted contract that Sarah had helped her prepare, her own terms for this bizarre arrangement. What she didn't know was that across town, Robert was making another phone call, his voice tense. It's done, grandmother. I found someone. Now keep your end of the bargain. The elderly voice on the other end chuckled softly. Oh, Robert, you always were terrible at reading the fine print. Did you really think it would be that simple? As the car glided through Manhattan's glittering streets, Madison steeled herself for what was sure to be the most important business dinner of her life. But she had no idea that she was walking into something far more complicated than a simple business arrangement, or that Robert's grandmother had set in motion events that would expose long-buried family secrets and force both Madison and Robert to confront truths they weren't prepared to face. The Christmas lights of New York City twinkled outside her window like stars, each one a reminder of the countdown that had already begun. 21 days until Christmas. 21 days to turn a business arrangement into a convincing love story. 21 days before everything would change forever. Le Bernardine's private dining room sparkled with understated luxury, but Madison barely noticed the Michelin-starred setting. Her attention was fixed on Robert Harrison III, who sat across from her, his usual commanding presence somewhat diminished by the shadow of worry in his eyes. Your terms? He asked. After the sommelier had poured their wine and disappeared, Madison pulled out the contract Sarah had helped her prepare. First, my position is guaranteed for 5 years after the divorce, with a non-termination clause and annual raises. She pushed the document toward him. Second, I want everything in writing, including the $5 million placed in escrow before the wedding. Robert's lips curved into an almost admiring smile. Protecting yourself. Smart. I'm not finished, Madison continued, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Third, we need a believable story. No one will buy a sudden wedding unless there's a compelling reason. Already handled, Robert replied, pulling out his phone. He showed her an article from 6 months ago, a charity gala photo of them together. We've been secretly dating since then. You've been keeping it professional at work, but we can't deny our feelings any longer. The holidays have made us realize life is too short. Madison stared at the photo. She remembered that night. She'd been there to make sure the company's executives behaved themselves. In the picture, she was laughing at something, and Robert was looking at her with what could be mistaken for affection. That's actually quite good, she admitted. I didn't become CEO by being sloppy. He took a sip of wine. Now, about the wedding. What aren't you telling me? Madison interrupted. Sarah found the modification to your grandmother's will. But there's more, isn't there? The mask of control slipped for just a moment, and Madison saw real fear in Robert's eyes. He glanced around, then leaned forward. My grandmother is dying, he said quietly. Pancreatic cancer. She has weeks, maybe months, but she's determined to see me settled before she goes. That doesn't explain the rush to marry a virtual stranger. Robert's knuckles whitened around his wineglass. "There's a clause in her will. If I'm not married by Christmas, everything goes to my cousin James, not just the company shares, everything. The foundation, the family properties, all of it." "But why Christmas specifically?" A bitter laugh escaped him. "Because my parents were married on Christmas Eve. My grandmother believes it's romantic destiny or some nonsense." He ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of frustration. "What she doesn't know is that James has been embezzling from the foundation for years." Madison's HR instincts kicked in. "Do you have proof?" "Enough to ruin him. But I can't move against him without control of the company. And I can't get that control unless I'm married." He fixed her with an intense stare. "That's why I need you, Madison. You're not just saving my position, you're saving thousands of jobs that would be at risk if James takes over." Before Madison could respond, Robert's phone buzzed. His face went pale as he read the message. "What is it?" Madison asked. "My grandmother. She's insisting on meeting you. Tomorrow night." He looked up, his expression grave. "She's hosting a pre-Christmas charity gala at the family estate." "That wasn't part of the deal," Madison protested. "Neither was my cousin stealing millions from children's charities, but here we are." Robert's voice had an edge of desperation. "Please, Madison, one night. If she doesn't believe we're really in love, everything falls apart." Just then, the maitre d' approached their table with an elderly woman Madison had never seen before. The woman's elegant appearance couldn't hide the hatred in her eyes as she looked at Robert. "Mrs. Harrison," the maitre d' said, "your usual table is ready." Robert's grandmother ignored the maitre d', her gaze fixed on Madison. "So this is her," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "The woman you think will fool me." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Madison watched as Robert's face transformed from shock to carefully controlled anger. "Grandmother, this isn't..." "Isn't what, Robert? Another of your manipulations." Eleanor Harrison's voice was soft but deadly. "Did you really think I wouldn't investigate the woman you suddenly claimed to love?" She turned to Madison, her eyes sharp as razors. "Tell me, dear, did he mention that his last girlfriend disappeared under mysterious circumstances? Or that the real reason for this Christmas deadline isn't just about the company?" Madison felt her blood run cold. "What do you mean, disappeared?" Eleanor smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Perhaps you should ask him about Christine, and why she left New York so suddenly last Christmas Eve." Robert stood up so abruptly his chair nearly fell over. "That's enough." "No, Robert," Eleanor's voice cut through his protest like steel through silk. "It's not nearly enough. You see, my dear," she turned back to Madison, "this isn't just about marriage or the company. This is about justice. And you, my dear, have just stepped into a family drama that's been brewing for 25 years. Madison looked between grandmother and grandson, seeing the same steely determination in both their eyes. But while Robert's held fear, Eleanor's held something else, a cold satisfaction, as if pieces of a long-planned game were finally falling into place. "The gala tomorrow night," Eleanor continued, straightening her designer jacket. "Don't be late. And Madison," her smile turned predatory, "wear something festive. After all, Christmas is the season for revealing family secrets." As Eleanor glided away, Madison turned to Robert, who had sunk back into his chair, looking more shaken than she'd ever seen him. "Who is Christine?" she demanded. "And what really happened last Christmas Eve?" Robert's response was cut off by his phone ringing. When he saw the number, his face went ashen. "I have to take this," he said, standing quickly. "Wait here." Madison watched him hurry toward the restaurant's entrance, his normally confident stride now uneven and rushed. Through the window, she could see him pacing on the sidewalk, gesturing frantically as he spoke. Her own phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Found something about Christine. Call me immediately. Do not sign anything." As snowflakes began to fall outside the restaurant window, Madison realized she was now entangled in something far more dangerous than a simple business arrangement. The question was, would uncovering the truth about Robert's past put her in the same danger that had made Christine disappear? The Harrison family estate loomed against the darkening winter sky, its Gothic architecture enhanced by thousands of twinkling Christmas lights. Madison sat in the back of the town car, her emerald green evening gown carefully arranged, while she replayed her earlier conversation with Sarah in her mind. Christine Martinez was Robert's executive assistant last year, Sarah had told her, voice tense with concern. She didn't just disappear, she went into hiding. I found sealed court documents. Madison. She filed for a restraining order against someone in the Harrison family last December, but it wasn't Robert. Then who? That's the thing. The names are redacted. But get this, she withdrew the request on Christmas Eve, emptied her bank accounts, and hasn't been seen in New York since. The car crunched to a stop on the snow-covered driveway. Robert opened her door, looking impeccable in his tuxedo, but with tension evident in every line of his face. "Ready?" he asked, offering his arm. "Do I have a choice?" His grip tightened slightly. "Just stay close to me. My grandmother loves an audience for her dramatics." The grand ballroom was a winter wonderland of crystal and silver. New York's elite mingling beneath enormous chandeliers. Eleanor Harrison held court near the massive Christmas tree, her wheelchair not detracting from her commanding presence. "Show time," Robert muttered, steering Madison toward his grandmother. "Robert, darling," Eleanor's voice carried across the room. "And Madison, how festive you look." Madison felt dozens of curious eyes turn their way. Eleanor's smile was razor-sharp as she continued, "I was just telling everyone about your wonderful love story, though I seem to have forgotten the details. When exactly did you two start dating?" Robert smoothly launched into their prepared story about the charity gala, but Madison's attention was caught by a man watching them intently from the corner. Dark-haired and handsome in a dangerous way, he had Robert's height, but none of his polish. "James," Robert said tightly, following her gaze. "My cousin." James Harrison moved toward them with casual grace. "The happy couple," he drawled. "Grandmother, you must be thrilled." "Oh, I am," Eleanor replied. "In fact, I think it's time for a family photo. By the tree, perhaps?" "Madison, dear, you don't mind?" As they arranged themselves for the photographer, Madison noticed something odd. In every family photo displayed around the room, there was a pattern she hadn't seen before. Robert's father was always standing in the same position, slightly separated from the group. "Perfect timing," Eleanor announced as the photographer finished. "The annual Harrison family Christmas toast. James, would you do the honors?" James stepped forward, champagne in hand. "To family," he began, his eyes glinting. "To traditions, and to secrets finally coming to light." Madison felt Robert stiffen beside her. Across the room, an elderly man she didn't recognize suddenly looked ill. "Speaking of traditions," Eleanor cut in, her voice carrying clearly through the hushed room. "Madison, dear, did Robert tell you about our family's special Christmas Eve custom? Each year, we gather in the library at midnight to open one special gift." "Grandmother," Robert warned. "Last year was particularly memorable," Eleanor continued, ignoring him. "Wasn't it, James? Such a shame about poor Christine's accident afterward." The room had gone completely silent. Madison's heart was pounding as she watched James's knuckles whiten around his champagne glass. "It wasn't an accident," a new voice rang out. A woman in her 60s emerged from the crowd. Robert's Aunt Patricia, Madison realized from her research. "Tell them the truth, Mother. Tell them what really happened 25 years ago on Christmas Eve." Eleanor's pleasant mask cracked slightly. "Patricia, this isn't the time." "It's exactly the time," Patricia insisted, "before another innocent person gets hurt. Madison deserves to know what she's marrying into." Robert moved to stand between Madison and his grandmother, but Eleanor raised a hand. "Very well," she said softly. "Perhaps it is time. Robert, why don't you show Madison the library, the one where your father spent his last Christmas Eve alive?" The implications of that statement hit Madison like a physical blow. Robert's father hadn't died in an accident 5 years ago. He had died 25 years ago on Christmas Eve in this house. As Robert led her through the whispers crowd toward the library, Madison caught fragments of conversations, just like his father, the same age now, history repeating. The library was a magnificent room, but Madison barely noticed the rare books and antique furniture. Her attention was captured by a large portrait above the fireplace. Robert's father, looking eerily like his son. "He was murdered," Robert said quietly, closing the doors behind them. "Right here in this room, on Christmas Eve. I was 10 years old." Madison turned to face him. "Who? They never proved it," he continued, his voice hollow. But he had discovered something about the family business, something illegal. He was going to expose it on Christmas Day. What did he find? Robert's laugh was bitter. "I spent 15 years trying to figure that out. And when I finally did," he trailed off, looking at the portrait. "Christine helped me find the proof. That's why she had to disappear, to stay alive. But she left me the evidence." The library doors burst open before Madison could respond. James stood there, his face twisted with rage. "Always playing the victim, cousin," he snarled. "Always pretending you don't know the whole story." Behind him, Eleanor's wheelchair appeared, pushed by Patricia. The old woman's eyes were gleaming with triumph. "Time for the truth," Eleanor announced. "All of it. About your father, Robert, about Christine, and about why this Christmas Eve will be different." Madison looked at Robert and saw real fear in his eyes. Whatever was coming, whatever truth was about to be revealed, it was worse than anything she had imagined. And somehow, she knew, it would change everything she thought she knew about the man she had agreed to marry. The library's antique clock struck 11, its chimes echoing through the tension-filled room. Snow fell silently outside the tall windows as the Harrison family's darkest secrets prepared to surface after 25 years of careful burial. "Your father," Eleanor began, her wheelchair positioned like a throne before the fireplace, "was not the noble whistleblower you imagine, Robert. He was a thief and a murderer." Robert's face went white. "You're lying." "Am I?" Eleanor's eyes glittered. "Tell him, Patricia. Tell him what his precious father did to your husband." Patricia stepped forward, her hands trembling. "George, your father, discovered that my Thomas was embezzling from the company. But instead of reporting it, he blackmailed him, demanded half the money." "No," Robert shook his head. "That's not possible. The night your father died," Eleanor continued relentlessly, "he wasn't planning to expose the truth. He was planning to flee with millions in stolen funds. Thomas confronted him here, in this very room." James moved to stand beside his mother, Patricia. "My father tried to reason with him. Return the money, face the consequences legally. But your father pulled a gun." Madison watched the color drain from Robert's face as his entire world tilted on its axis. "The police ruled it self-defense," Eleanor said softly, "but we kept it quiet. For the family's sake, for your sake, Robert. But that's not the whole truth, is it, grandmother?" Robert's voice was barely a whisper. "Tell them what you did with the money." Eleanor's composed mask slipped for just a moment. "I don't know what you mean." "Christine found the records," Robert said, growing stronger, "not just of my father's theft, but of how you and James have been stealing from the foundation for decades, using my father's scheme as a template." James lunged forward, but Robert was faster, pulling an envelope from his jacket. "It's all here. Every transaction, every shell company, every fake charity. Christine didn't run away. I helped her hide after James tried to silence her. She's been working with the FBI, building the case." "You fool!" Eleanor hissed. "You destroy your own family." "You destroyed this family 25 years ago," Robert shot back, "making me believe my father was a hero, while you used his death to hide your own crimes. That's why you wanted me married by Christmas Eve, to sign over control of the foundation before the FBI closes in." Madison finally found her voice. "The wedding deadline wasn't about tradition at all. You needed Robert to take legal responsibility before everything collapsed." Eleanor's laugh was hollow. Very good, my dear, but you're too late. At midnight, James will present the board with evidence of Robert's mismanagement, a tragic repeat of history, the son as corrupt as the father. Not this time. The library doors opened, revealing Sarah Chen with 2 FBI agents. The board's not coming, Mrs. Harrison. But we've been here all along. Madison, Robert turned to her, his eyes full of apology. I couldn't tell you everything. I needed your help to make my grandmother think her plan was working. The job offer, the marriage proposal, it was all to keep her distracted while we gathered the final evidence. Madison's mind raced back through every interaction, seeing it all in a new light. The contract negotiations, the public story. Had to be convincing, Sarah added. We've been building this case for months. Christine's been safe in witness protection, waiting for tonight. As the FBI agents moved forward, Eleanor's composure finally shattered. You ungrateful boy, she spat at Robert. Everything I did for this family. No, Robert said quietly. Everything you did was for power. But you taught me one true thing, grandmother, the importance of family. That's why I had to stop you. James tried to run but was quickly apprehended. Patricia sank into a chair, tears streaming down her face as she watched her son being handcuffed. Eleanor sat in her wheelchair, suddenly looking every one of her 80 years as an agent read her rights. As the chaos unfolded, Madison turned to Robert. So none of it was real? The proposal, the deadline? Robert reached for her hand, surprising her with the gentleness of his touch. The method was fake, the deadline was orchestrated, but choosing you. His eyes met hers with an intensity that took her breath away. That was real. I've watched you for 3 years, admired your integrity, your strength. I knew you were the only one I could trust with this. Trust, not love, Madison said softly. Trust first, he corrected, still holding her hand. But these past few days, seeing you stand by me, watching you piece things together, I'd like the chance to see if it could be more. No contracts, no deadlines, just us. Outside, the snow continued to fall, and somewhere in the distance, church bells began to ring, announcing midnight and the start of a new day. The library, which had held so many dark secrets, now felt somehow lighter. Madison looked at their joined hands, then up at Robert, the man she'd thought she'd known, the man who had surprised her, and the man he was now becoming in the wake of truth. They were all the same person, finally free of the weight of his family's lies. Well, she said, a small smile playing at her lips, I do still have that contract from Sarah. We could start by negotiating some new terms. Robert's answering laugh was genuine, perhaps the first real laugh she'd ever heard from him. Dinner first. No hidden agendas, no secret recordings, no FBI agents. I'd like that, Madison said, and found that she truly meant it. As they walked out of the library together, leaving behind the agents processing the scene, Madison thought about how differently this Christmas was turning out than she'd expected. Sometimes the greatest gifts, she realized, came not in carefully wrapped packages or million-dollar deals, but in moments of truth and the chance to begin again. Robert squeezed her hand gently as they stepped out into the snowy night. Above them, the Christmas lights continued to twinkle, no longer a countdown to a deadline, but a promise of something new, something real, beginning exactly when it was meant to. What would you have done in Madison's position? Would you have trusted Robert from the beginning, or would you have walked away when things started getting suspicious? And here's something to think about. Do you believe people can truly change when faced with the truth about themselves? Can love born from deception transform into something real? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear your perspective on this. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, don't miss out on our next incredible video. It's waiting for you on the left side of your screen. Trust me, it'll give you those same intense emotions you just experienced. You won't regret clicking. And remember, your support through subscriptions and likes keeps us going, allowing us to bring you powerful, emotional stories every single day. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and join our amazing community of story lovers. Leave a like if this story touched your heart, and let me know in the comments what you think will happen next for Madison and Robert.